First off, Hamilton's Mercedes contract will run out at the end of this year's racing season, and this is the main reason for the rumors. This year has not been very kind to the Mercedes team, and by extension Hamilton. He has been known to complain openly about their prospects this year. All in all, the antics of both Hamilton and the Mercedes team seem to be pointing to the inevitable, where each party goes their separate ways. And if ever Hamilton were to switch teams, would he drive for Red Bull? Stick around for the details. Hamilton and the Mercedes team have since come out to debunk the rumors, and have insisted that a renewal of the contract between them is on course. They also say the relationship is rock solid, and Hamilton himself has more or less said he's not going anywhere. But the reality is far from what the press releases and publicity stunts suggest. To be fair to Hamilton, he is a 7-time champion who loves to win. And Mercedes' more recent woes are at odds with Hamilton's ambition. As such, the Mercedes team would have to do more if they wanted to keep their star driver. But as if on cue, Horner, who is the principal of the Red Bull team, has weighed in on the rumors of Hamilton joining his setup. Without mincing words, he has categorically stated that he doesn't envision Hamilton ever joining his team. Will that sort of statement come back to bite him? At the moment, both Red Bull drivers are at loggerheads. There is some rivalry in the ranks, with each team hoping they can ultimately mount the podium. Usually how such teams work is that one of the two drivers might be required to take one for the team, but we suppose every team has its own intrigues. Moreover, drivers have been known to move at the expiration of their contracts, so when you consider that drivers can get dissatisfied or distracted, you realize anything is possible. For instance, Verstappen could begin to feel threatened by his teammate, and that could lead to a fallout between them. On his part, Hamilton might lose his patience, which is already probably spread thin by now. Again, anything is possible in Formula One within reason, but we were only being hypothetical just then. Verstappen's contract runs until 2028, while his teammate Perez will race the Red Bull car until the end of 2024, and then he too can get a contract extension if he so chooses. Perhaps it's too early in the racing season for Hamilton to leave the Mercedes team, and he knows it, so rather than stir the nest, he'd prefer to run down the year before announcing anything. Or perhaps the team's chances at a podium finish will increase as the season progresses into 2024. Ultimately, it comes down to the unity and competence of all members of the Mercedes team going forward. Without that collective will throughout the season, they might end up parting ways with Hamilton. Toto Wolff, who is the principal at Mercedes, has come out to say if Hamilton decided to leave, he wouldn't hold it against him. He also admits the issue comes down to a competitive car. Mercedes has had a bad start to the year because of a less than reliable race car design. The mistake made was simply to overhaul the design under the new FIA rules, and this move has so far proven counterproductive. There have been issues with the side pods and a tendency for the car to sag in the middle and thus scrape the racetrack. All in all, it's about poor design and engineering on the part of the prestigious Mercedes brand. However, in an instance of doublespeak, Toto Wolff has said he is confident Hamilton will extend his Mercedes contract. He has also described the rumors of Hamilton being poached as silly season talk. So which one of those statements are we supposed to believe? Horner has since chimed in, saying he is happy and content with the drivers he has right now. Horner also acknowledged Hamilton as a great race car driver in the same breath, so he more or less deflected the notion half-heartedly. Perhaps all it goes to prove is that he respects Hamilton as a championship-winning driver. It's almost like being offered a collectible item you don't necessarily need. Mercedes and Hamilton have a long history together. Hamilton had been driving in Mercedes colors since 2013. He won all but 6 of his titles there. So there's an emotional connection somewhere that would make it harder for Hamilton to leave. Again, we look to the car and its significance. We gather that Mercedes is doing an overhaul of its racing car to get back to winning ways. But as it turns out, this was a risky gamble for 2 consecutive years, and the first 2 races of this year have ended unsatisfactorily for Mercedes. However, there are a few things that can still be tweaked on the fly as the season progresses. Just as we realize, it might take some real ingenuity from the technical side to save the season for Mercedes. Mercedes might even resort to imitating the Red Bull design, and they won't be the first because Aston Martin has done the same with good results. Aston Martins are placed second on the leaderboard, ahead of Mercedes. So Mercedes is looking at this and saying to themselves, why not? It's not that complicated. Horner, the Red Bull boss, has come out to say that imitation is the best form of flattery. But it can come back to bite you, for instance, if Aston Martin goes on to win the season with the design they nicked from Red Bull. We agree that that would be the upset of all upsets. Red Bull is cognizant of such a possibility, and so their strategy is to dominate the rest of the grid now that they have some comparative advantage. Then there's the feud between the Red Bull drivers. Both of them have one victory apiece already this year, and no doubt this makes for an interesting season. Outside of that, the grid seems predictable if you consider that Red Bull might dominate throughout, and the first 2 races of this season suggest as much. The way in which the Red Bull cars have performed so far hints at the fact that there are no other credible challengers. As such, you could argue that there would be no spectacle and that this year's winner is obvious already. Perhaps the internal rivalry between Verstappen and Perez will fill that void. Ultimately, what does Hamilton have to say about all the circulating rumors? It's the second year in a row that Mercedes has fielded an underperforming car. Are they trying to tell him something in the lead up to contract renewal talks? Whatever the case, Hamilton has said he still believes in the team. They have a great history together, no doubt. Hamilton's body language is one of loyalty, but the same can't be said of the team, or maybe we're reading too much into it. Again, the ever-present problem is a competitive car. Back in 2022, the excuse was that they had been too aggressive in their design. So this year, they stripped and toned down quite a bit of it. In both instances, the car was a shadow of itself. We could even argue that there are elements of incompetence or sabotage somewhere in all of this, but let's not exaggerate the problem. So what are the options available to the team in the short to long term? First, they could tweak the car a little and manage to end the year decently. Heck, they might as well copy Red Bull, depending on how desperate they want to win. In the mid to long term, they could dig deep. At least they now know what design decisions will not work. Can a driver switch racing teams mid-season? It's highly unlikely. This means all that talk of Hamilton desperately hoping to win a title by changing sides was only silly talk, as Otto put it. Hamilton has, however, revealed that there are no performance-related incentives in his present contract with Mercedes. That would certainly be discussed during contract renewal talks. It's those same incentives that encourage drivers to push themselves and challenge personal records. Ultimately, it's not just the driver who wins, but the team too. The truth is, Hamilton has been with Mercedes since he was 13, so attempting to leave now doesn't seem right. In 2022, Red Bull seized the initiative by besting Mercedes. And for the first time in a while, Hamilton wasn't on the top step of the podium. It had been 8 straight seasons of constructor dominance for Mercedes prior to now. But Horner of all people has predicted that Hamilton and Mercedes will bounce back this year. Is he simply being cheeky? Horner has a little problem of his own. His 2 drivers are being openly competitive. It reminds us of that story where 2 tigers are fighting for ownership of a carcass, and a third simply comes in and steals it away. Or in other words, as Horner put it, there are a few banana peels down the road.